The rating gap between chess amateurs and professionals is absolutely unfathomable. The average player on chess.com never surpasses the 1400 ELO mark. And just to make that gap bigger than it already was, streamer Hikaru Nakamura just set a new world record for the highest chess.com Blitz rating in history. A few days ago, Hikaru Nakamura reached 3,336 ELO. For those unfamiliar with chess ratings, Stockfish, the best ever chess computer, is only 210 ELO higher. In 2020, the previous chess.com Blitz record was set at 3,332 ELO, over 3 years ago today. Can you guess who held that record? It was Hikaru Nakamura. Let me reiterate, nobody broke his record in 3 whole years, so he had to break it himself. He reached this peak in several games against 15-year-old American FIDE master Liam Putnam. He beat the 2,950 rated FIDE master 15 times in a row. And today we'll look through the game that got him over the line and talk about why his celebrations might be cut short. Hikaru Nakamura is a man of many openings, and considering he has the Candidates Tournament coming up in April of 2024, he most definitely doesn't want to give away his best theory, especially when it could be considered his most important tournament in all of his career. I say this so you're not surprised when Hikaru doesn't blow his opponent off the board in the first 15 moves. He takes this one right to the end. Hikaru opts for a reti in this game, and for the first 4 moves, the black pieces mirror the white pieces until Liam eventually strays away on move 5 by playing bishop e7. Hikaru immediately strikes for the center with d4, but there's no rush for black to take back the center because d4 will always be possible for the black pieces. So Liam goes ahead and castles here, Hikaru develops his bishop, and now d5 is played. The pawns are traded off, and you can see here that although Hikaru took the center early, it didn't really matter because Liam now also has a center pawn. Hikaru then continues with the best move castling, and the players continue developing pieces to get them in their optimal positions, and we wait until we get to the first crucial moment of the game, which is c4, a pawn break. By the way, I feel like if I don't mention this, you guys won't appreciate it enough, but we have played 12 moves of near perfect theory. Look at the clocks. They started at 3 minutes. Liam has used 7 seconds with the black pieces and Hikaru has used 10. These guys are playing at light speed. It's here where Hikaru makes the first mistake of the game and snaps up at the center here, allowing black to take back and having strong control over the center. Obviously, hindsight is a beautiful thing, but later on in this game, Hikaru will have a lot of difficulty with one of these pawns, and I think if he could go back, he probably wouldn't have taken in the center. A better move here maybe was knight e5, and if takes, you go here, knight e7, and you can simply develop your knight. This bishop holds this pawn, and you've actually got a great attack with both bishops looking directly at the king. Instead, Hikaru wants to develop his bishop. With bishop f5, it's the best move on the board, and Liam makes a little bit of a mistake here. Obviously, he's still playing fast, only 13 seconds have come off his clock since the game begun, but in this position, he has simply blundered bishop takes f6. If you take with the pawn, you highly compromise your king's safety, and if you take with the bishop, you lose this pawn, which is actually the best move. You should take with the bishop and accept that you're losing a pawn, but black is just going to have a lot of positive outcomes in this game if it can just grab a pawn early and try to win the game on that. Hikaru doesn't see this though, and instead he opts for knight f4. What I assume that Hikaru did see it, but he didn't think it was winning enough. You have to trade off your strong bishop, and you only get this single pawn in response. The issue is with trading off a strong piece and just getting 1 pawn advantage is sometimes in these games where you do this, it's almost not worth it because you're trading off a very strong piece, and the rest of the game you have to play incredibly accurately, because if you make one misstep, you don't have your strong pieces on the board to kind of claw back at the game. So Hikaru goes for knight f4 in this position, and Liam then plays bishop d6, threatening to just snap off this knight immediately. This bishop doesn't really have a home. These pawns in the center kind of constrict it. This bishop is going to become good eventually whenever d4 is played, but if black can trade off this dark square bishop for the strong knight on f4, it would love to do that, but Hikaru Hikaru doesn't want this and plays knight e3. Liam puts his queen on a more active square on e7. This is just preparing knight e4, of course, and Hikaru comes to a point where he worries that his bishop might get trapped, and he sees that if he can go back here and get g3 in, and then fianchetto his bishop, he's actually in a very good spot, because he sees that this bishop is not the strongest piece in the world, and he can actually counter this bishop, which we said before was actually going to become very strong once these pawns get rolling, and you can combat it by taking its diagonal from it. So that's what Hikaru wants to do here with bishop h3, and Liam continues with knight e4 as we said. Hikaru plays g3, preparing this fianchetto. The rook comes in and gets active. The queen going to e7 was so that this rook could come behind these pawns and take the square that the queen was on. That is the reason for queen e7, if you were wondering. But Hikaru just continues with his idea bishop g2, and we get to an important point after knight g6, queen c2, where these pawns eventually start rolling. You get knight back, and then c4, and this is where the problem lies with Hikaru taking that pawn. Initially, he had to play in a very accurate way, but Liam now gets c4 in, which is going to cause real problems for Hikaru. B takes c is obviously the best move here, and it's the one that's played in the game, but black will not just play d takes c in response, allowing white to take, because even after something like this, pinning the knight to the queen, we can just go queen a4, and this position is very good for white. We are simply up a pawn, and there is nothing that black can do about it. But instead of taking back with the d pawn, black will play this intermezzo and take on d2 instead, forcing the queen away from this pawn's defense, and now d takes c can come, and this is just a passed pawn. There are no adjacent pawns stopping this pawn from coming through, so Hikaru is going to have big problems with this pawn going forward. Hikaru then moves his knight out of danger and putting it on f4, and after black takes, Hikaru will take away from the center with his e pawn, opening up this file, maybe trying to hit this queen at some stage. But in this position, it's going to get a lot worse for Hikaru actually, because this pawn is now doubled, and although black is not up a pawn, it really seems like it now, because this pawn is it's completely passed. There are no pawns for two files on its right, and on its left there's an entire free file. The only takeback is that this pawn might become weak at some stage and it'll never be able to promote, but effectively black is almost up an entire pawn here because these pawns are doubled. The engine doesn't agree with me right now, but it will in a second. Liam then trades off the fianchetto bishops. We said before that these bishops would combat each other. The reason that you come back is to combat this bishop and make it less effective, but black says no, I will take that bishop, and then bishop b4, harassing this queen, and you can't take it because the queen defends, of course, so white has to move, and then queen b7, this king just came on g2 to capture the bishop, so we have to move back, and then we have to go back again. The bishop goes back because we were actually threatening this checkmate, and the bishop will go back. It's the only move in the position for black, really, and you'll see that after rook c2, it keeps getting bad for white. I mean, how are you supposed to make progress when you are completely out of tempo on every move, it seems like? I mean, rook e d8 is a mistake, but I mean, you go back, and then rook d3, and we said this pawn was going to become a big problem for Hikaru, and it's anchoring this pawn, allowing the rook to come in. You lose tempo again, you have to go back to e2, and then queen d5. I mean, rook d8, and then what is white doing here? This pawn is very difficult to capture. It just feels like you're never going to capture it. Sure, you've got this bishop here defending it from going to c3, but it feels like you're going to have long-lasting issues in this position, and ones that I don't really see a way to be fixed. It doesn't feel like you should be able to fix them. So let's see what Hikaru does here. Hikaru then goes rook fc1, but black keeps striking. He's still swinging h5, and the issue is, let's give black an extra move. What if just h4? And let's say you take, what is this? Have you ever seen this? That is disgustingly ugly. These are two doubled isolated pawns in the worst spot of the board. They're right in front of your king. But what if we let black take? Then we open up these two files. I mean, the queen sees this one. Let's get the bishop in too, so everyone can just have a piece of the king. This is really difficult for Hikaru to defend. And you'll actually see, you can't see the eval right now. It's -11 in this point if Hikaru allows it to get to this position. So this is not something that Hikaru wants at all. Of course, we've given given black a few moves, but Hikaru really needs to put his foot on the gas and get something out of this game. I also just want to take a moment to commend Liam for playing such a great game up to this point. He has played phenomenally against the world #1 Blitz player. He's only a FIDE master and only 15 years old, so he's played very well to get to this point. Hikaru responds to H5 with H4, and this seems like, it seems like one of the only options, but it seems like it would have a lot of risk, but in the position, it actually doesn't really have too much risk. If this bishop was a light square bishop, then all of these light square weaknesses could be really taken advantage of by black here, but this is a dark square bishop, so black's going to have to make do with bishop c5 here, pinning this pawn to the king, and maybe at some stage you'd like rook d8, rook d2, and this pawn is going to fall. And Hikaru doesn't want this, he doesn't want to be pinned, so he plays king h2, and up until this point Liam has played fantastic, but it is here that he makes one small oversight, and this is what I was saying in these games where you have where everything is so close. Liam is clearly playing for a win here with this passed pawn. Hikaru has the double pawns, and we said when you have such minor advantages like this, you need to play perfectly, and unfortunately Liam doesn't. He makes one mistake, but when you're the #1 Blitz player in the world, one mistake is all you need when you can sacrifice the rook. Rook takes c4. If you take with the queen, I take. If you take with your rook, I take your rook. And if you take here, I take here. And now it's game on. Now white has a chance to win because white has the extra pawn. You're simply up a pawn. Sure, it's doubled, but Liam has 35 seconds left. Hikaru has a minute 20. Hikaru has played so quickly up until this point. And Hikaru is really going to give Liam a run for his money now. Really keep in mind the time situation that Liam is in, because it's going to make a lot of things make a lot more sense. Obviously, black cannot take this pawn because it blunders the bishop, so that is not free. So instead, Liam goes for this queen c5 move, putting pressure on this f2 pawn, and Hikaru decides that he wants this bishop off the board. I think at this point, Hikaru realizes that this is anyone's game. Really, in low time pressure, these ones can go either way, but Hikaru has almost a minute on Liam right now, so he's certainly thinking that I can trade off the bishops, it's the best move in the position anyway, and I can still be in for a really good shot at winning this game. After bishop takes, you do not want to take back with this pawn really, because it just gives you a lot of weaknesses here. Hikaru decides that he wants to take with the queen, and if queen takes, pawn takes, Hikaru is just up a pawn, and this is very easy. So Liam obviously does not want to take with his queen. He plays queen c2, and Hikaru simply plays a3, and this is just looking very good for Hikaru now. This pawn is defended by the queen. You've got this check-in. This pawn could become weak at some stage. This pawn could become weak at some stage. This is Liam's game to lose now. It completely is. Liam was in a very good spot. He made one mistake, and now it's Hikaru's game to win, and he is up almost a minute. We said this before. He's up almost a minute. Liam has 29 seconds. So from this position, Liam quickly plays queen a2, and Hikaru plays f5. When you have these double pawns like this, you oftentimes want to just sacrifice this pawn temporarily, use it to break up the pawn structure in front of you, and kind of just make your life a little easier. It's not really do anything on f4, so you may as well push it. He goes to f5 here. Liam immediately attacks us with queen d5, but we can have queen f4, and obviously a4 is always possible. You can't move this pawn 2 squares because it's already moved, so Liam goes to attack this, but Hikaru doesn't even defend it. It's not even the best move. f6 is the best move. It's what we said, breaking apart this pawn structure. If you take, then this is actually quite good for Hikaru. You can just take this, allow this to be taken, and you're gonna have nice compensation here. Obviously, here is a fine move also, maybe a little more drawn, but really allowing yourself as many checks as possible in an endgame like this where you're just up on time is just ideal, especially if you're in Hikaru's position here. So f4 is played. Obviously, well, not obviously, but it's not taken here. It's not taken here. The queen takes here on a3, and now we said before that we wanted a lot of checks, and Hikaru is about to get those checks. The king goes to h7. We take here. This king needs to take, or the pawn will promote. It's defended by the queen. queen. So the king does take, Hikaru begins checking, and then he eventually picks up this pawn. And we've got a 3-on-1 here. Despite there being a pawn over this side, Hikaru has a 3-on-1, and more importantly, Liam has 14 seconds remaining. This position is completely drawn, but it doesn't mean there's no ideas left to explore. Hikaru tries to bully the king a little bit and then begins pushing a pawn of its own. He owns the diagonal right now, so if this pawn were to promote, he would be having a good time. But he also needs to remember that this pawn is also weak, and if you step onto the g2 square or the g1 square, you're going to have some checks that you maybe need to look out for at some stage. So Hikaru's got to be aware of that, and he addresses that immediately after Liam pushes his a4 pawn. He goes here, the king will have to move, and now you can continue to push your pawn, but the issue is now that this diagonal is not defended. But Hikaru has a nice idea for that. Queen b2, attacking the f2 pawn and holding the diagonal. 10 seconds remaining, by the way, for Liam. Hikaru plays h7, it's the best move. You push the pawn, but now you're getting checked. If the king goes there, we check there. If the king goes here, we queen, king runs out the way, takes here, queen here, we win the game. We're holding this pawn, and this is not what's played. We play this, but we get this anyway, where this queen is traded off, and there is nothing that black can do because white dominates all the squares and white wins the race. Hikaru won this game to get the all-time blitz record of 3,333 at the time, and he went on to win 3 more games before eventually drawing to Liam. In the next game, Liam blundered rook a1, which is just a discovered check. You will take with the king, and then you win this rook, and this is completely winning for the black pieces. Hikaru then got into this position where he found a fork, and a few moves later, he found this fork on this pawn and this pawn, completely shutting out any counterplay that black could have had. And in the final game before he eventually drew, Liam played the move knight f3, hitting the queen, but not realizing that this blunders this check, and black completely dominates this endgame. Hikaru may have set the record for the highest blitz rating on chess.com, but why may his celebrations be cut short? 2 words. Magnus Carlsen. Magnus Carlsen recently played 20 consecutive blitz games against 2,964 rated Croatian Grandmaster Leon Levajic. He won 18 games, drew 1, and lost 1. Magnus Carlsen now sits at 3,295 ELO in blitz. Do you guys think that Magnus Carlsen has what it takes to go toe-to-toe with the king of speed chess?